You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.
Join us now for the expert source for inside information on the options markets. It's time for Options Insider Radio with your host, Mark Longo.
All right, everybody. That music means it's time once again for the show that started it all. Yep, it's time for Options Insider Radio, the interview program here on the network where we welcome on guests from throughout the world of options and derivatives and sometimes beyond and proceed to pick their brains for the benefit of you, the listener. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, in this aforementioned network. Glad you guys are enjoying the slew of content that's pretty much hitting you every day here on the network, sometimes multiple times a day. We know you guys are stuck at home, a little bit more time on your hands, and probably also worried about the market, so you need a little content coming your way. We're happy to oblige. Glad you guys are enjoying it. Keep those questions, those comments coming. We do love to hear from you. And also, if you like what you're hearing, make sure you leave a review on the platform of choice that you're listening to so that other new listeners can continue to discover the platform, particularly in these troubling times. People need a little bit of good content in their lives these days, and we're happy to provide it. Keep those reviews, those comments coming. We do love to hear from you guys. And joining me on the program today, old friend of the network, even though he's changed hats once or twice or about a dozen times, Mr. Todd Rich, these days wearing the hat of the head of education over there at Nadex. Mr. Rich, welcome back to the Options Insider Radio Network.
Thank you. It's good to be back. And I will say, at least this time, we're properly social distanced.
Yes.
I'm not sitting in your studio right now with a hot cup of coffee across the desk from you. Unfortunately, the times preclude that, don't they?
I can still see the coffee maker here. It's the Todd Rich Memorial Coffee Maker. No one else has really requested hot beverages right before a show except for you. You may remember his voice may sound a little bit familiar, listeners, because Todd used to be a regular on our Option Block program back when he was at E-Trade/Options House. In fact, I was thinking about it before the show. You may be the guy I know in the business, Todd, who's worn the most hats in the option space. You were a market maker back in the day. You worked at an exchange, which was Box. You did the tech vendor/exchange thing over there at NYSE Tech. Of course, you did the broker thing, and now over there back at an exchange/broker again. So what is it that brought you to Nadex? What are you doing over there these days?
Over at Nadex, well, I'm doing what I did at E-Trade, only I'm doing it over at Nadex, which is educating the retail customer, the true retail customer, about the various opportunities in the options markets. I have moved around a bit. That's because we have been in the last decade, it's been the period of the great consolidation. The New York Stock Exchange got bought by the Intercontinental Exchange. Options House got bought by E-Trade. E-Trade got bought by Morgan Stanley. It's just one after the other. Going through integrations after acquisitions and liquidity events, it's sort of been my thing. So who knows? Maybe that's in the store for Nadex. I don't think so, but kind of funny. It would be running in a motif. But over at Nadex, it is about retail customers. And Nadex does have some different, unique, and they are options products for the retail customer. And what's kind of cool about them is everything that they do, it is different than what you see in other markets. It is designed specifically for retail customers, and it's all done in a totally defined risk-reward fashion.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because obviously Nadex has been on. You guys were stalwarts back in the day with Dan Cook and our much bemoaned, much missed Futures Options Roundtable show, which has morphed, which is what we now do every week with CME over there this week on Futures Options. So still getting that nice Futures Options taste on the network every week. But then we kicked that off way back in the day with Nadex, actually, and Dan. So Nadex has been a part of our network over and around and popping in from time to time for quite some time now, but it's been a little while since we've checked in with you guys. So we, of course, have had an influx of new listeners, particularly over the last few months, as you might imagine. Folks are scrambling for a little good content out there, Todd. So why don't you do me a favor, give our audience a quick overview or refresher. If someone's new, they're not really familiar. You kind of mentioned the quick retail focus of Nadex. So explain that a little bit. What are the products? What do you guys do over there at Nadex?
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, once we start talking about the products, it gets really interesting, particularly for the retail customer in certain markets. But that's just a sort of little tee-up, a little teaser of where I see this conversation end up going. But at Nadex, it is a wholly regulated exchange in the United States. It is regulated by the CFTC. And its unique proposition is mostly around two products: binary options and knockout options. And, you know, you may have heard those terms before, or those might be brand new terms to you. That's really where Nadex cut its teeth, was in binary options. There was a big boom I'd say about 15 years ago in the binary option space for retail customers. Unfortunately, there were a variety of nefarious actors in the industry, and so binary options sort of waxed and waned, and they're coming back very strongly, particularly in Nadex, because we are the only operating regulated exchange in the United States for binary options. And the question then is what is a binary option? And everyone actually knows what a binary option is. They just simply don't know that they know it. And it's a prediction that either has one outcome or another. So there's two potential choices. Will the Dow Jones Industrial Average close above 23,000 today? Yes or no? And we're all familiar with propositions like that. I don't really want to equate it to gambling, because it's not, but people do understand, will the bears cover the spread? Yes or no? So will the Dow Jones close above a certain level? Will the S&P 500 close above a certain level? Will a commodity, and we're going to have some fun with this, but oil or gold close above a certain level, foreign exchange pairs, and then we even have event contracts now in the binary space where you can predict and will an economic number, and those have been moving the market as of late, things like GDP and non-farm payroll and unemployment reports. Is the number going to be reported above or below a certain level? And all of our binary options, as I mentioned, are geared toward the retail customer. The total notional value for any one of these is only $100. So, it's small. So it's really geared toward someone who doesn't have a huge or a large cash balance to invest or to trade in the markets. You can access price action in all these markets with very small quantities of money. And when I say the notional value is 100, that's the maximum. These contracts they're binary in nature. When you make a prediction, that prediction either comes true and the contract settles at $100, or it's false and the contract settles at $0. And you can buy or sell any of these. So I'm just going to walk through a simple example. If you were to predict, is the And you know what? I should have looked at the market. Where is the S&P right now?
Of course, we're rallying again because it's a day that ends in Y, right? So the markets are back up. The S&P is up about 0.33%, 3,065 right now.
So perfect. So there might be a binary option, and I don't have the platform open in front of me, but 3,060 is the S&P going to close at the end of today or at the end of the week? There's daily contracts, there's weekly contracts. We even have contracts that are only a couple hours long, or in the indexes even just 20 minutes long. What's going to happen in the next 20 minutes? Will the S&P 500 be above 3065 in the next 20 minutes? And since we're right there at 3065, the probability of that being true is probably 50-50, because the market can either go up or it can go down. So you would see the price of that binary option. Will the S&P be above 3065 in the next 20 minutes? Be right around 50, where you can risk 50 and the contract could potentially settle at 100. If it does settle above in the next 20 minutes, that level, it would go to 100. So you would be risking 50 to potentially make 50. If you don't, you can sell it. You think, hey, I think this thing just popped right now, and I think we're going to see a sell-off going into the end of the day. You could sell that in anticipation of thinking it won't be true, and that the contract would eventually settle at zero. So again, your risk if you sell it is that it goes to 100. So if you sold it at 50, it could go to 100. So you're still risking just 50. And if it goes to zero, you'll make the 50 that you sold it for. So binary options around commodities, around events, around indices, around foreign exchange pairs, and the price action that you can see in 5-minute binaries. Pretty popular product. There's a lot of alliteration right there. At Nadex, where people want to see some price action, some volatility in price, and they'll go into those 5-minute binaries in the foreign exchange pairs because with 5 minutes to go, a lot of things can change, a lot of things can happen, and the probability of any particular binary option being true or not can swing pretty dramatically, but it's exciting. It's an exciting world where you can make a prediction. Just because you put the trade on, you can always take it off before. You don't have to wait until the end. So if you think something's going to happen and you buy it for a 50 probability, and as the day goes on, as you get closer to settlement and it's now trading at a 85 probability, you could just sell it, take your $35 profit and go do something else. You don't have to leave it on and risk it in the event that something happens in the last few minutes where all of a sudden it drops below the level. And that can happen. So for the retail investor who's looking for some great price action, binary options, limited risk, limited reward, you get to make your prediction. You can buy them, you can sell them, and Nadex is the only operating regulated exchange where retail customers have access to these. I know that there are some offshore places where people go online and they Google it and they find some markets, but whenever you do that, there's always the risk that it could potentially be one of those nefarious actors that's out there in the world. And so that's one of the nice things about Nadex is we are totally regulated by the CFTC.
You actually exist. I can testify to that. They're down the street here from the studio. Maybe not right now. The office is there. They're scattered to the winds. Someday I'll share our email with you, Todd, of the legion of offshore binary firms that hit us up on a nearly daily basis over here. It's impressive, the level of tomfoolery they get up to. But the market itself has gotten up to some tomfoolery of late, particularly in March and in the height of this pandemic-induced sell-off. We are now, of course, on the other leg of that, apparently a very aggressive V-shaped recovery, which is continuing as of today, despite the fact that the entirety of the U.S. is burning. But that's a conversation for another day. But one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is, as you mentioned, you guys have a little bit of a unique perspective on the space. You're engaging with a unique audience, with a unique type of product, very short-term in duration, which could be very attractive at a time like this where people want to kind of take limited bites at the apple because they don't really know what the heck's going on out there. So walk us through what the last few months were like for you guys over there at Nadex. Did you see an influx of people coming onto the platform? Were they perhaps scared away? And also, if you saw people coming in, what were the hot things? What were they trading?
First, we've never been busier. It's unfortunate it's fortunate that we happen to be in a space where there was a lot of pent-up demand with people wanting to access the markets in a much more economical way, in a much more defined risk, defined reward way. And so we've never been busier. We have absolutely never been busier with new participants, new customers, a lot of people becoming much more engaged and active. One of the biggest things that we saw, which was rather interesting, was around our oil markets. Now, not only do we have binary options, we also have knockout options. And if you're not familiar with a knockout option, and I'm going to use oil as an example, you buy or sell a level. So you're actually trading the price of oil. When you buy a knockout contract, or if you buy a knockout contract, it has predefined knockout levels below and above. So if you buy it and it touches your upper boundary, you will be knocked out for a profit. No slippage. That's the contract settles. It hit your maximum potential profit, and there you go. But if you're wrong and it goes down and it touches the lower boundary, you got knocked out. No slippage. That's it. You knew exactly how much you could potentially lose. Conversely, if you sell a knockout and it goes down and it touches that lower boundary, you'll be knocked out for a profit. And if it were to rally and it hits the upper boundary, you'd get knocked out for a loss. So that's why they're called knockouts. You got these boundaries around the level that you're buying or you're selling in an underlying asset. And we saw a huge influx of people wanting to access the oil markets. And I can tell you a lot of the more traditional brokers actually shut off customers' access to those oil markets. If people wanted to trade oil at a traditional broker, a lot of them, they had challenges around managing risk. And I know a lot of them put customers on liquidation only, meaning they couldn't put on a new position. And there was definitely some confusion, particularly when oil went negative. People didn't realize that could even happen. With a Nadex knockout, or even with the Nadex binaries, it was defined risk. You knew exactly what your potential loss was getting into it. And if something odd happened, your risk was totally defined and totally limited. So we had access to the price of oil. Our oil markets stayed very active and vibrant and liquid through all of that, and everyone had access. That's one of the biggest things that we saw in all this craziness was people who wanted to get access to the price of oil could do so at Nadex, and they were precluded from doing that at other places.
I'm glad you brought that up because that was obviously a pretty crazy time in the commodity space and in the broad market space. I don't think I've ever seen more interest or just demand for talking and analysis of crude when it all went negative over there. So walk us through that day in particular. We saw extreme steps being taken. Like you mentioned, massive brokers like IB taking massive losses, others restricting what their clients do. We were hearing stories that the CME had to actually contact these brokers and tell them, hey, crude can go negative. It was a thing they had never really planned on in the past. And so we saw CME actually listing strikes, negative option strikes. Did that happen over there at Nadex as well? Could I come on and buy I think it got down to about negative 40 in the front month there. Could I buy a settle below negative 40 binary? Did you guys get that far on the platform?
Yeah, we did not have that. And that was a very brief period of time too, where you had that anomaly. But what you did have is as the market went into that phase, and let's say you were in a knockout, those knockouts all touched their lower boundary and were simply stopped. And so people couldn't go negative. They couldn't lose any more. And it was a crazy time. I mean, nobody really quite realized that when you're trading oil futures, the physical ability to take delivery does become an issue if there's no capacity for anyone to actually, to store it. It does cost money to store oil. Someone has to put it in a facility. Someone has to maintain and operate that facility. You have to insure that facility. It's expensive to store any commodity. It could be a grain, but oil in particular, because there is limited storage capacity, no one ever thought that would ever happen, but the stores got filled up and they needed to make room for fresh oil coming in. Hopefully we don't see that again.
Yeah, I think that's safe to say from everyone's perspective that we don't want to see a return to negative times. Is it fair to say then that you saw an influx of customers coming maybe from traditional brokers who were angry that they could only liquidate, or perhaps wanted a more, shall we say, risk-mitigated approach to crude? Did that drive a lot of customers your way?
I'm going to say it was both. It was both. When you want to have access to a market and you can't, you'll find it's, out of necessity, right? You'll find your way to access those markets. But the fact that we offer access to all these markets in a very defined risk-reward way, they're easy to understand products. They're a little intuitive. When you first take a look at them, they might seem a little confusing. A binary option, like why is it such this confusing term? Well, that's because it can either go to 0 or it goes to 100, but the fact that you know what it is and that when you place your prediction, hey, I think this is going to happen, and maybe you do it early in a day and you get to halftime, you get to the middle of the day, and your opinion changed. And something changed. You're always allowed to go ahead and trade out of your prediction, go the other direction. The fact that you can do that throughout the day and manage your predictions in the binaries or in the knockouts for that matter, but the fact that they're small, they're very small. The binaries are 100, the total notional value of 100. For most part, our knockouts are generally $500 wide spreads. So if you're doing something in the middle, you might risk 250 to potentially make 250 or some combination thereof. I think the NASDAQ is the only one that's $600, but they're all small contracts, definitely manageable risk, a way for the retail investor in a very defined risk-reward way, in a very cost-effective, low dollar amount way, low notional amount way, access prices, price action in all these markets. And that's what we were really seeing. People with smaller amounts of money wanting to do so in a very understandable, defined risk, defined reward way.
The last time you guys were on was probably back right at the beginning of the year, right before all this stuff happened. I believe Dan swung by our studio when we could still have in-person guests. It seems like an eternity ago now. But since then, you guys have been pretty busy. Obviously, crude oil has been active, but you guys have been pretty active yourselves, adding new listings out there. Let's look at in January, you added non-farm payroll, weekly jobless claims reports products. You added Mexican peso shortly thereafter that, GDP and unemployment. And you just kind of talked about in March, which was good timing, auspicious timing, some might say. You added gold and crude oil knockout option contracts to the offering. So first off, is there anything I'm forgetting there? Have at it, and then that's already a lot of products for a few months. And then B, what made you guys decide to add these new products to the mix?
Yeah, no, that was, as we've started the new year, we definitely have had a lot of pent-up demand for additional product, and I will tell you we're going to be pushing more product out throughout the balance of the year. And it's always a balance of managing what the highest priority for our customers. What we're hearing from our customers, what is it that they want to see? The event contracts are a lot of fun. You're not going to see as much price action in those, but a lot of interest in those economic numbers and the ability to make a prediction around those definitely has people engaged. In regards to the knockouts, the knockout option contracts are such a great contract, and our timing on that was impeccable. I can't say it was by design because we knew those markets were going to go crazy, but oil and gold were a natural to add, and because of the way that they trade and the size of those markets and the fact that there's people with lower quantities of money that wanted to access those, it just made sense. And then that you mentioned that, I kind of like it. A currency pair that you generally don't see very much. because it's still considered an emerging market, but that's the U.S. dollar to the Mexican peso. Now, that might not make sense to a lot of people around the planet, but to folks here in North America, we've got our neighbors to the north with the loonie up in Canada, and then our neighbors to the south, it's just never been something that people have had access to, but we all, or a lot of Americans do travel down to Mexico, and it is definitely, the Mexican economy is definitely tied to the American economy, as is Canada. So for us to offer those currency pairs across all of North America is innovative, definitely innovative.
Yeah, a lot's been going on the innovation side. Like I mentioned, we've been keeping an eye on Nadex for quite some time, many years here on the network. And I used to tease Dan back in the day when you had things like bull spreads and you had to sell a bull spread. It was somewhat counterintuitive language. Took him a long time to get that fixed and overhauled, but now you guys have. You really have. I'm looking at the website before the show. You guys have really done a complete overhaul to the platform. There used to be a very heavy, large install of Nadex Pro. All of that is gone. You have a brand new website, a brand new learning center up there as well. So folks want to kick the tires on some education. I'm guessing that falls under your wheelhouse there, Todd. So walk us through some of the upgrades you guys have made on the online front and on the website front, and indeed what this learning center is, Todd, that folks can get access to.
Actually, well, what I am going to tell you, I'm going to tease it out there a little bit. We even have a brand new look to our website that's going to be coming out soon. Much more sleeker.
Oh, so this isn't even final then?
Yeah, it's going to be just friendlier, a definite facelift, and a fresh look and feel. So a new website is coming. But more important than that is we have a new platform out there. And it is, I will say, the charting on the new platform is leaps and bounds above what we used to have. Now, if someone was going to go look for it, it would actually be called the beta platform. Right now, if you were to log into Nadex, you can open up a demo, by the way. Anyone can go and open up a demo account and practice and play around with it. Check out the markets. Test drive it. You go to nadex.com and you'll definitely be able to open a demo account. But I would recommend once you've created one, instead of just logging into the platform that's served up immediately, you'll see a big button that says join the beta. And I would launch the beta platform because that is actually soon not going to be beta anymore. We're going to be moving everyone to the new platform, which is a much better, cleaner, user-friendly design. It's simpler to use. It's easier to understand. It is not real heavy. And best of all, it's got some pretty cool new functionality, particularly around charting and doing some technical analysis.
Well, since you're in the middle of teasing some new stuff, we'd like to leave our audience with a little bit of a hint, a little bit of a tease of what's coming on the platform. You kind of just mentioned the new website, a new functionality, a new platform. If you want to give us any more concrete teases, have at it, sir. Then if folks want to kick the tires on all this new cool stuff like the Learning Center and everything else for themselves, where should they go? What should they do, Todd?
You know what? I'm actually going to throw out something a little different, is check out our YouTube channel. We've been making some improvements to our YouTube channel. You go to Nadex YouTube, and if all of this is totally unfamiliar to you, we last week just had a full 2-day virtual education summit. One whole day of basics and one whole day of advanced concepts. We are in the process of getting all those recordings up on YouTube. But if you go to the Nadex YouTube channel, there is a lot of video content up there where you can pick and choose what it is that you'd like to see. If you want to learn about the basics of binary options or the basics of knockouts, or using them on our platform, or even some of those more advanced strategies. You mentioned Dan talked about some strategies from our virtual education summit. There's a strategy up there in regards to knockouts, and even Dan did one on strangles with binary options. So different than strangles what you would see in the traditional space. Similar though. Very similar. It's just a little different on how you execute on it.
Yeah, I remember strangles were a pretty popular use case even back in the day. Like if people would trade the traditional larger size futures options, maybe WTI, maybe the equity indices, and then use the binaries as a bit of a kind of a strangle, kind of a faux knockout themselves to kind of mitigate their risk on the wide ends. Check it out for yourselves, listeners. Head over to YouTube, Nadex, Nadex. Just search for that over there. You'll find it, or head on over to nadex.com to kick the tires for yourselves, or give them a follow on the old Twitter machine as well, just at Nadex. A lot of places you guys can go to see what's going on in the world of binaries. Todd, glad you could join us from yet your latest new hat that you are wearing, and we'll look forward to catching up with you and the team over there at Nadex again very soon.
All right, thank you very much, Mark. Great chatting with you.
We're back very soon ourselves as well for more content here on the Options Insider Radio Network.
The preceding program was a production of the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.